Welcome to A Mason's Work, the podcast where we review Masonic symbols and illustrate how they can be used to solve problems in everyday life. With your host, Brian Mattocks, a proud member of the Craftsman Online Media Network.
Okay, so yesterday we talked a little bit about the anatomy of agreement and what that means and what does a commitment look like. We've got the requester, we've got the receiver, we've got the specific action to be taken and time standard, and then consent, the explicit agreement itself. Today, I want to talk about what happens in the microsecond between your mouth and your brain processing the conversation, because most commitments break when that is left to chance, right? So the tool we talked about last week, the ARAA sequence, the awareness, reflection, analysis, and then action sequence, in what we're doing here runs really quick. So we want to make sure that we can deal with the fact that conversations, particularly commitments, tend to run a little bit faster in real time than sometimes our brain or our hearts can catch up. So here's how we're going to get around this. We're going to take the reflection and analysis stages of that process and make them no longer exclusive to internal dialogue. We're going to make them public. So here's what this looks like. So we always start with awareness. Awareness is the first part of any sort of understanding, and that is, what am I feeling? What's going on? What do I know? Right? What am I aware of? When the request from someone else lands, the first understanding that you're going to have is what is actually being asked. What is it that this will cost me? What does it sound like? What do I know, and what can I infer, and what assumptions am I making? Those pieces will kind of emerge from your awareness as you're having a conversation. Most folks don't take the time to understand what that is because they're too busy acting on autopilot. So the way we're going to get this out of your head is by, as you become aware of these things, kind of put a little checkbox next to them where you're going to take that and make sure that you bring that up in a conversation. And this is where you move to the next phase, that reflection. And you're going to extrovert that reflection. You're going to take that process that you would normally do sitting by yourself, thinking about what went down, and bring it out into the open. And you start by saying, I think I heard... or I feel like that would put me in a position to It is entirely appropriate to extrovert this effectively by stating the facts. Make that reflection process not just something exclusive to you. Now, we're not talking about high pressure negotiations here. We're not talking about, you're negotiating a hostage crisis. This is not a place where you want to hide any commitment that's going to matter. You don't want to hide what's going on. I know this sounds odd because we're taught in so many ways to essentially hide the ball, to get something from someone else without, get more out of these conversations than we're putting into them, right? We're all wired for that discount. We're all wired for that imbalance where we feel like we've won. But genuine connection and contracting and agreement requires an honest to goodness sharing process of mutual vulnerability. So by stating what it is you think, or you think you understand, and asking these questions out loud, you're not stalling. It's not like a technique or a tactic to try and create a one-sided outcome. This is about understanding the reality of the environment. And then the analysis phase is where you talk about what they understand versus what you understand in terms of these relationships on either side of the conversation, whether you're the requester or the recipient, right? And being able to articulate the downstream effects right? And this is where that referential integrity comes in, where I know, for example, that the moment I leave this conversation, because I was more interested perhaps in approval than the work itself, that when I go to do the work, I'm going to feel resentful. Holy moly, if you can come to that understanding as a group or in that contract conversation, you are going to essentially build the foundation for something like, hey, and I'm going to need your help here along the way, making sure I can deliver on what we talked about. This analysis phase gives you that mutual back and forth understanding where, as upright as you can both be, you can begin to understand the working realities of any of the commitments you're going to make. What does it look like? How is this going to be? Oh, I know that I get distracted easy by X or Y or Z. Maybe it will help if we build some check-ins into whatever this agreement is. And a lot of this is Brian's shadow talking, right? A lot of this is, I know my own issues. And so when I have contracting agreements, I ask for these things like, hey, if the work doesn't get broken down small enough, I don't do very well. So you're hearing some of that in my suggestions here. Your suggestions may vary. You may be really, really amazing at some of these things that I'm less amazing at. And so they may not be part of your concern. You may have other stuff come up. Don't take my crazy on. I wouldn't recommend it. So as you're going through this, extroverting that analysis phase then moves to the action phase. You might say things at that commitment level, and the action is a place where you start that close is, we've agreed to this. We've agreed to these things. We've agreed to a timeline. Sometimes the agreement that you're going to come to at the end of this kind of extroverted ARAA process is, I'm going to need some time to better reflect before we come back together. This is A-okay and desirable, where good commitments really need to happen. When you have stuff that's on the high importance, that's on priority for both people, it is entirely appropriate to take that process, that ARAA process, and move back and forth on it. Take time to then go off and reflect if you can't do it in the room, and that's entirely appropriate. And where you can do it in the room, be honest in those conversations. As you go through this, you'll find that, particularly if you can do this with other people, you're going to strengthen the relationship even by virtue of, even if you don't make a commitment at the end of it, by virtue of having these conversations. So we'll get a little bit more into what the triage looks like and how do we artfully say yes or no, or maybe later, or things like that, a little bit more in tomorrow's episode.
The views represented in this podcast are those of the speaker alone and are not representative of any grand or subordinate lodge.
Hi, Brian here. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any suggestions or guidance for further episodes you'd like to see or hear, whatever the case may be, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at masonswork.com, and we will try and incorporate your suggestions into a future recording. Thanks.
Freemasonry teaches us that the true work is within, a lifelong journey of reflection, discipline, and discovery. At A Mason's Work, we help Masons bring out their best selves through meaningful self-inquiry and symbolic practice. From personal reflection to lodge engagement, we offer tools that turn symbols into action. Visit us at amasonswork.com. The work is within. The time is now.